In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. I'm going to get out in front of this one this week. Here in Germany, the Grizzlies will be taking on the Orlando Magic in two international games. First here in Berlin, second in London. I don't have my usual microphone set up, so apologies if the audio quality isn't quite what it usually is on this podcast. But we wanted to bring you one anyway, because I don't know if you've noticed, Chris, but there's a lot going on in the world of Grizzlies right now.
There kind of is. Like, you know, do we start with Friday when the trade availability news came out? Do we start with today in Berlin where you were at a Grizzlies practice? I'm going to leave that up to you, but I mean, there's so many ways to get into it.
Everyone's listening to this for Ja. You know, it's kind of the unfortunate part of doing this podcast and this international trip, because I think there is such great opportunity to bring different content to the listeners and different content to the readers at the Daily Memphian, and hopefully you are both. It's all kind of overshadowed by the Ja Morant stuff, if we're just being honest about it. Like today, first question from practice was, is Ja Morant going to play? Everyone knew that. That was very predictable. And there was a ton of international media there. To let you know, we'll start with this before we get into the Ja stuff. Just to paint a picture here, we go to the practice today, and it's me and athletic reporter Joe Varden. He's their national reporter. And we're asking questions about Ja to Tomas Isolo. And everybody else was kind of just asking about Germany and whatnot. And the Grizzlies media session concludes, and there are reporters. I mean, I have our editor, David Boyd, in the room. There were probably 150 media there. He's nodding yes. Probably 150 media members there today, or close to 100. Maybe that's a little bit high of an estimation, but from 30 different countries. And when the Grizzlies media session concluded, and immediately after that, the Wagner brothers were doing their press conference, I was one of maybe 4 people that did not attend the Wagner brothers press conference and went back to write about the Grizzlies. So it is going to be a massive Orlando Magic home game on Thursday
Right.
here in Germany. Like, that could not have been painted any more clear with the festivities today. But yeah, we did get some news. Isla says there is a chance Ja Morant will play. He did practice with the team. As has been the case, I think, before the last few games, was not like present during the media session where we were able to view of practice. That's been the case. I know that was the case Friday. I did not go to the game on Sunday. Did they have a shoot around on Sunday?
They did not. It was a 2:30 p.m. tip.
They did not. That's right. Early tip. So the one practice that they did have, or shoot around that they did have, Ja was not on the court when the media was available to go out there. So they have definitely left it a pretty big mystery whether or not he will play in Europe. But it sounds like there's a possibility there that he will, and we can get more into that. But we have to backtrack and just start with Friday. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to start anywhere else. The report comes out, something I think that you and I had alluded to the last 2 weeks. I hope people were listening.
Yep.
That the Grizzlies are entertaining trade offers for Ja Morant. There has been strong reaction on social media. I expected nothing else. It seems to be split. There are some folks that say this is the time and it makes sense, and there are other folks, and I know we're sometimes guilty of looking at social media and thinking that's the majority of thinkers, but they may just be the loudest thinkers. um, who are strongly against any Ja Morant trade. Let's start here, Chris. You and I both wrote columns that essentially said, "How did we get here?"
Right.
But let's recap how we got here. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a similar, not only similar viewpoint, but similar, focus on. I know for me, there's a lot of things you can get into with this, and if and when he's traded, there'll be more opportunities to do so in terms of putting a bow on what this has been. But I was really focused on, maybe too focused, I don't know. But he had 3 hours to write on deadline when this pops up in the middle of the day, just as I was about to sit down for lunch. But I was very focused on why did the organization make this decision? Because I think this was an organizational decision. There's different things you've heard about, what Ja wants or doesn't want, and what the internal communication between the Grizzlies and Morant was. But ultimately, this was the team deciding to make him available via trade and putting that message out there that they are making him available. And so, like, why is the question? Well, we've all been watching this play out for 3 years, and so, like, I mean, we've sort of chronicled it in real time. But to me, and I started talking about this, coming into the season. To me, the core of it was he was eligible for a contract extension last summer. I think he wanted one. We don't know all of this 100%, but I think we're pretty comfortable saying this. He wanted one. Maybe he even expected it. The team was not comfortable giving it to him. And what seems to have been the case, and I think Zach Kleiman made this about as clear as he really could during the summer, was that they wanted this season for Morant to prove something. We're not comfortable giving you an extension now. We want to see you. I'm guessing, but we want to see you on the floor more regularly, playing at an all-star, all-NBA level. And if you do that, we can revisit this again next summer. It was a show and prove season for Morant relative to a contract extension for the Grizzlies. And it seems, rather than embrace that as like a challenge, he's been sort of been out of shape about it. And it seems to have impacted his play and his demeanor. And I think the Grizzlies reached a point where they just decided we're not going to get comfortable enough to give an extension. If we're not going to get there, it's time to move on. That seems to be where it is to me.
I agree with everything you said. What I love about your writing is that you flush out everything. And I think you did a really good job in the column. And I would highly, highly encourage people to go read it.
That's a very polite way of saying long-winded.
Yes, I'm not as long-winded as you, but I feel like
Right.
you hit all the same notes as me. I just didn't spend the time that you spent on
Right.
getting into the details or write it as elegantly as you. But I agree with everything you said, and I would go back to what we have been saying since the beginning of the season, which is that this was a decision about whether or not you believed Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson were championship caliber players capable of carrying you to higher end outcomes, as Zach Kleiman said. Not first round exits, but higher end outcomes. The reality of that situation is that Ja has just not been on the court enough this season to feel confident in that.
Right.
And when you've played a limited amount of games and when you've played well in a limited amount of those games, in addition to everything else that has gone on this season, the 1 game suspension, it's enough to change opinions. And the truth is that Zach Kleiman, first reported in the Daily Memphian, I will add, said last year that any trade talks involving Ja Morant was pure fantasy. And at some point, that changed. The thinking changed on that. And I know that if he was at one point thinking that last year, and maybe that was a way to back up his point guard, to back up his star player, but it becomes hard to do when he is in search of what he,
to the point you just made, I want to underscore that a little bit. I think that was a performance meant to try to manage the emotionality and the temperament of the player and maybe some of the people around the player.
I agree. And I'm going to add this too, because I know that some people would say, if you think that Ja's not a championship caliber player or whatnot, if you're going to come in here and be critical about Ja Morant, then you're just a pawn for the organization or whatever. No, I think it is incredibly possible that if the Grizzlies trade Ja Morant, they won't get a player the caliber of Ja Morant for years. There is no promise that this team is going to be better if they indeed trade Ja Morant, which it seems like an awful lot like they're headed in that direction. But I do think you have to look at the facts in front of you. You have to look at the picture in front of you. And the picture right in front of you is not a good one. Is not a positive one. Right? This team is well below 500. Ja hasn't played in a lot of games. It's been uncomfortable still. And after seasons of it already being uncomfortable and the Grizzlies backing Ja Morant in totality, I think there may be some fatigue of being uncomfortable. I don't know.
I, I think looking backward, and I think what I wrote, what you wrote on Friday was focused on the very recent history a little bit, and the present, especially like where they are right now. I think if you want to look back on it, and I think the organization at least has some degree of culpability in the Morant stuff not getting off the tracks. I think Morant has obviously a lot of responsibility there, but I think the organization has some culpability there too in terms of how things were handled. But I sort of have two big questions sort of looking forward that I did not write about on Friday. One is I wonder, and we may be about to find out the answer to at least one of these soon. The other, it'll take a while. I wonder how much of Morant's availability and performance issues in the recent past have been tied to his mood and his sort of buy-in attitude, all of that stuff, right? I don't think all of the availability issues, I don't even think most of them have been. I think he's got a durability problem and he gets hurt. But if you want to just go back over the last 2 years, you can find individual games. So you wonder if he were a little bit more balled in, would he have been in that game? I think that's a real question for some of the games he's missed. And some of the games where you watch him play, obviously the game in Halloween night where he quit in the second half, but some of the other games where he just doesn't seem as totally engaged, you wonder about that too. So I do wonder about the possibility of someone getting Ja Morant in a trade and suddenly they immediately get a much better, more consistent Ja Morant than the Grizzlies have gotten. I think that's very possible. But the other thing, and this is as much an issue for the Grizzlies as that issue, is what's the arc going to be for him as he goes through his late 20s and across into his 30s in terms of these issues of availability and performance. And that's really the other thing here. That's why I keep getting back to the contract. He had 2 years left on the contract he currently has. He was wanting an extension, which depending on when he would sign it, might be 1 or 2 more years on top of that. Well, at that point, you're pushing towards that age 30 at a large dollar figure. And I think from the jump, people have wondered about how his game would age. And when you add in the durability problems and some of the declining, rim attack, kind of stuff we've seen, the lack of improvement of shooting, I think that's a real concern. So I think the long range thing, I think was a real problem in terms of having a commitment. I think the shorter term question is something that if he goes somewhere else and immediately, at least for this year or next year, looks like an all NBA player consistently, I think that's going to raise a lot of questions about Morant not doing that. And it's going to raise a lot of questions about how the Grizzlies, may have mismanaged it a little bit.
No, yeah, I think that's definitely the case and definitely possible. And just to revisit the idea that maybe it's a little uncomfy, like I think that with each day, it can get more uncomfy now that this is public. And I as of a few weeks ago, I thought, you know what? I understand the logic and the thinking behind this idea that you have to analyze whether or not these are high-end players capable of getting you to the heights you want to get to. But also, I just wasn't really 100% confident in saying that answer was no without seeing them alongside Zach Edey, and
Yeah.
without seeing Ja and Jaron and Zach Edey together with Cedric Coward and like getting a real taste for that. And so for that reason, I always felt like logically it made more sense for the Grizzlies to play out the end of this season and then make that decision in the offseason. Now that is still a possibility, right?
Yes.
And we can get into that more. But I think what the Grizzlies have to weigh now before the trade deadline on February 5th is just how uncomfortable this is. Is it so uncomfortable that you have to do it now because it's just going to be a burden on the rest of your season and you're just going to make people more mad? Their fan base is going to get more frustrated. Or if you feel the need, like you have to do that now. And I think that is one of the primary questions at this exact moment is, and we don't have a full answer to that, at least not a full public answer to just how uncomfortable, or publicly reported answer to just how uncomfortable things are in that locker room and the relationship between Ja and the Grizzlies. Is it so torn at this point that you feel like you have to do something before the deadline? That's a very interesting question as we move forward.
What are the frustrating things? And this is why I keep sort of circling back to this contract thing, because I just think that's at the core of it. Because in the absence of that as an issue, you would wonder, like, what exactly is the problem? Like, maybe, and we're guessing because Ja Morant has not said, what the problem is. You could try to interpret by watching, right? Do you want to be playing more minutes total? I mean, look at how frequently you get injured. Do you not like the shorter stints? I think that's super reasonable, by the way. And it felt
Yeah.
like when Morant came back from that first injury, they were playing him a little bit longer stints. It seems like there was a compromise there. I think you look at what he did last season after the coaching change. Now, the team struggled, but he was putting up, 28 points a game or whatever that last stretch after the coaching change, and was awesome in the first half of that playoff game before he got injured. He endorsed Isolo, coming out of the season, seemed to have a positive attitude about it coming into the season. And I think by all indications, from a basketball standpoint, Isolo should be a pretty good coach for Ja. I think the fact that he hasn't had Edey there has been a problem. But in terms of the way Isolo wants to coach, in terms of wanting to play fast, wanting the hands in the guards, wanting it all sort of fits, or it should fit Morant. Maybe Isolo is not the best communicator for Morant. Maybe it got to a point where it would be hard for people to be a good communicator with Ja. It really feels like, when something went awry early this season, Ja overreacted to it, and then when Isolo apparently reprimanded him in front of the team, that Ja just didn't take that very well, and maybe the Grizzlies are partly responsible for him getting to a place where he's just not used to that. But it all just seems so unfortunate, because it seems like if you could just get past some of this little stuff, like, it's not a bad situation. Like, it shouldn't. The long range things that would keep you from wanting to give an extension, I can see as that is just something you can't get past. That maybe neither side can get past that. But the short term basketball stuff just doesn't seem like it should be this big of a deal.
Yeah, well, as we talk extensions and things like that, I would note Ja Morant did move on from his representation.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily bode well for making sure feelings don't get hurt in conversations like that. But
Yeah.
I would also add that, and we can talk trade value or whatever. I have some other questions I want to get to before that, but it's probably not just the Grizzlies that would say we're not willing to put a max contract on the table for Ja Morant. And if a team is going to trade for him, I wonder if they are ready to do that, or if like it might get uncomfortable for the next team down the line.
No,
You know?
That's right. That's right.
It's
Sometimes when you see these trades happen, there's some understanding. This we went through this with Jimmy Butler sort of last year. The Grizzlies didn't actually go through it much, a little bit, but the whole saga around Jimmy Butler, part of that was what is the money waiting for him, the new money waiting for him from a new team after the trade, right? That was a big driver of the whole situation. And Golden State he wanted to go to Phoenix because that's where the most money was waiting for him. He ended up going to Golden State, which did extend him, for a decent amount of money. How much of that is going to play into the actual trade stuff? That's a very good question.
It's an underrated complexity to this that hasn't been discussed very much, but I think is very relevant. Okay. I was texting with Jeff Calkins earlier today, our colleague. Jeff, who recently retired from the radio. Congrats to him. And so now I hope a lot of people are coming to this podcast to listen to you, Chris, since I know you had such a wide fan base. Jeff suggested you and I do a Q&A piece on the Daily Memphian. I got a lot going on right now, if you can't tell. So we're not going to do that there.
Yeah, but timing that up might be a little bit of a challenge.
These are questions posed by Jeff Calkins that he wanted us to answer. There are 4 of them. And I'll ask each one and we can go through them. Number 1, is there any chance Ja Morant won't be traded by the trade deadline? I've already suggested the answer is yes to this. And there's serious logic behind that conclusion, I think. You want to see what Ja looks like next to the rest of the roster. Who knows if you'll ever get the rest of the roster together? Seems unlikely. But I do think that there is some value in potentially seeing that. So I think the answer to this is yes, there's certainly a possibility he won't be traded by the trade deadline. And the other part of it is what can Memphis get and how long is Memphis willing to wait for the right trade package?
Yeah, there's two different paths that lead past the trade deadline with Ja Morant still in the Grizzlies uniform. One of them I referenced when I wrote on Friday. The Grizzlies have sort of done this before. They did this. Zach Kleiman was in this front office. He was not leading this front office, but he was in this front office. They did this with Marcus All, Mike Conley in, I think, 2019, where they said, it was Adrian Wojnarowski at that time, and puts out the Grizzlies have let it be known they are entertaining offers for the first time for blah, 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 blah. But leaving open the possibility of not trading them. They fielded offers for both. They got a deal. They liked Marcus All. They traded him at the deadline. They did not think the offers they were getting from Mike Conley were good enough. They did not trade him at the deadline. They kept him through the season. They revisited it in the summer where they traded him to Utah. Now, that was Mike Conley, right? I don't know if they could have done that with Marcus All. It may have been too uncomfortable. And the Ja Morant situation is more uncomfortable than the Marcus All. But that Conley path is one of the 2 paths I'm talking about. That is, we still want to trade this guy, but we don't think these offers are good enough. We have a certain threshold we need to get. And if we don't get it, we'll wait till the summer and we'll revisit it in the summer. I do think there's a possibility that happens. I do think the Grizzlies could be willing to do that. The second path, which they have made a point to leave open, is, maybe we don't like the offers. Maybe, this is something I'm paraphrasing or sort of embellishing, what they've said. Maybe we don't like the offers. Maybe this is a shock to the system. And maybe we can repair things and we get through the deadline, we play out the season, and we decide to move forward together with Ja Morant. That's possible. I think it's much less possible. I think the more likely scenario of Morant being, and I think that should be possible, but I think the more likely scenario is they don't like the offers and they just revisit it in the summer.
Question number 2. Well said, Chris. Question number 2. Is this about the coach? And I think what Jeff is alluding to here is there seems to be the sentiment, at least online, which is quite the place at the moment, that maybe the Grizzlies are choosing Ja over the coach. I'm happy to go first here, unless you have a point you need to make.
I mean, I'll just do a quick. I don't think it's primarily about the coach. I think I don't get the sense that the East Slow-Ja communication has been great in season. But I think the problems, the Ja Morant problems we've been talking about that go back 2.5 years predate Isolo. Not only Isolo being the head coach, but Isolo being in Memphis. And I think the structural contract issues are way separate from Isolo. So I think there's a possibility that some of Ja's more general frustrations have been Islo's become a target for some of those frustrations. But I don't think they're choosing Islo over Ja Morant, and I don't think Islo is the primary issue here.
Yeah, before the incident that happened in October on Halloween, well before that, this John Moran extension stuff was already in the air, right? And
Yep.
at that point, that was not an Isolo decision, right? He didn't have the job until May. We were talking about this at the end of the last season that Ja would be up for a contract extension. So that decision to not extend Ja was made before Ja had the argument with the coach that he took public. And so I would just say I don't think that timeline lines up to say that they're choosing the coach over John Morant. I don't think that this is a fight between the two players. By the way, I'll just add this. If Ja was an all NBA level player and was totally awesome this year and he didn't want the coach, I think the coach would go. That's just the way the NBA works.
Well, not
I don't know if he'd
no.
I don't know if he'd go in on January the 13th as we record this, but it just
Well,
that timeline
yeah.
doesn't add up to say choosing one over the other. It doesn't add up because the fight, the argument, fight's a bad word. The argument that happened between the two of them happened after the decision already to not give him the extension.
Well, and just, I mean, even beyond that, if Ja were that player, if Ja Morant coming into last summer were the same player with the same stature and the same everything he was in 2021, 2022, he also would have got the extension. You know, they would have said,
Yeah.
yes, sir, like, here, whatever you want, please sign. So it's about all that stuff. The coach is to me a secondary thing and probably a distraction from the core issues.
Number three, why would they trade him? We've kind of already answered that.
I
It's
like
a
how Jeff wants us to do a Q&A of questions we've been writing about and talking about for 3 weeks. Apparently, Jeff is not a listener or reader.
Jeff is gonna hear that and be upset. Um, I'm sorry, Jeff. Jeff, I like you. I know Chris sometimes gives you a hard time. I like you, Jeff. Um, yeah, let's skip that one. We've already answered that a bunch of times. Number four, why are return packages so depressingly small? I mean, that's a question we can answer. Chris, why don't you go ahead on that?
Well, first, we don't know what the return packages are. Why are they presumed to be
Yes.
what they're going to be? I think for the same reason they're making them available, right? It's he has been an unreliable player in terms of availability, performance, and attitude for close to 3 seasons. He is getting older while having the kind of game that people worry will not age well. The contract is large, and the league itself is shifting away from these kind of players a little bit. You look at just what just happened to Trae Young, right? There's very little return from Trae Young. I think there's a lot of concern about the size, the durability, the defense, the shooting, and all of that. And that's why.
Okay. Yeah, you nailed it. I'm Chris. Jeff did not pose this question. I'm going to add one more, number five, because there's a lot of talk about Zach Kleiman right now, and there's some people that are frustrated with Zach Kleiman. Predictably, I think, given this situation, Thi- to me, a little bit. This feels a little bit like one of the moves, like the same way coaches come and go in the NBA. General managers come and go in the NBA. And I get the sense that the Grizzlies are very committed to Zach Kleiman, but you don't have endless moves typically in the NBA. And I'm not saying that as a reflection even on the job he's done, because if you go look through the drafts, it's it's been very good. The track record is very good there. But this is a monumental move, right? Like, I don't know if this, how you view this in terms of the life cycle of like a general manager, but man, this is a big move for a general manager to make. No?
Sure, but I think there's a
Like,
little.
how do we think the franchise views him in this point? I'm asking this because there are fans that are frustrated.
I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the idea of Ja Morant as a quote unquote star and the day-to-day reality of Ja Morant as a basketball player and a basketball player with a contract in a league where contracts themselves are viewed as assets, positive or negative. And I think that's why there's this gap between the way some fans react and then like what the actual value seems to be from the other 29 NBA teams, right? There's this real disconnect between the idea of Ja Morant as a star and the reality of Ja Morant within the way the NBA basketball structure works. And so from the first standpoint, it seems like a big move for the GM. From the second standpoint, it seems like the obvious move from the GM. And so there's a real disconnect there. I mean, you listen to like national NBA reporters, like none of them are saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe the Grizzlies are making Ja Morant available." They're all saying he's been available. They just didn't want to talk about it, and they're 2 years too late. Now they may be wrong about that, but that is sort of the attitude around the league. It's not, "Oh my God, the Grizzlies might trade Ja Morant." There's a real disconnect there.
I agree. We podcast for everyone, though, right? We don't just
Yeah.
podcast for our national media friends. We podcast for everyone, including the people that might be frustrated that their favorite player may be headed out the door. And I'll just add, I think Zach Kleiman is going to have the freedom to build this team up after they move on from Ja Morant, if indeed that happens. But I do think that, we have to address things that a lot of people want to seem to talk about. I'm getting comments on stories and stuff at the Daily Memphian. I believe Zach Kleiman will have that freedom. There might be
Well, no,
people, fans
I
that
wasn't
disagree
trying to.
with that, but I think that is the case.
I wasn't trying to say this is obvious or it's not a topic. I was trying to illustrate that there are these different levels, and as the GM, are you operating? You're operating in both. You're operating as the what are your fans going to think, but you have to operate from that sort of more cold, sober.
Yes.
What are you doing? You're not trying to win a press conference. You're trying to do whatever you think is best for basketball, and a lot of times you're going to be wrong about that. But that's sort of what you have to do.
This is not the Luka Doncic trade for so many reasons.
It's
It is
not.
not the Luka Doncic trade, right? There will be fans that feel like it is because that's how much love Ja
Right.
has in the city. And I will give Ja credit for building that fan base. And I think some of it is just the way he plays and how electrifying it is when he's out there and how captivating it can be. Some of it is the fact that he really has seemed on so many levels to relate to the city of Memphis and hit all the right notes and relate to the crowd, his crowd. And I give Ja a lot of credit for that, but these are not the same things, right? Luka Doncic was an MVP candidate, right? At that time. Ja has not played in enough games to qualify since his rookie season. So it's these are two separate things, but I certainly see that. And so I wanted to at least address it. Can we move on to Europe? Can we move off of Ja, move on to these games that are coming up,
Yeah.
or maybe talk a little bit about
Yeah.
the last few games? Okay, let's do that. But first, let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
How was the strudel?
Strudel.
Yeah, you had any strudel?
I haven't had any strudel.
How's the Wiener Schnitzel? I don't even know what that is, but that's a German thing.
Haven't done the Wiener Schnitzel yet. Did currywurst.
All right.
Did currywurst. Big fan of currywurst. I was introduced to currywurst, and I was meaning to ask you this, Chris. Was it in LA or San Francisco where we were for the playoffs and we went to that big food hall that had all those international foods?
That was Los Angeles.
LA. Okay, so we were in LA. That's when I first tried currywurst. I gotta say, German currywurst a lot better than LA currywurst.
Okay,
You may be surprised to learn.
I can imagine.
No, the food is interesting. We went to the most authentic German restaurant you possibly could imagine yesterday when we landed, and that's Five Guys. So we went there yesterday
Why are you going
because
across? Why are you traveling overseas and going to Five Guys? It
because
seems like such a
because
waste.
we so I got redirected. I was supposed to fly Memphis to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Berlin, got redirected, flew Memphis to Paris to Berlin. And when I landed in Paris, Air France screwed up my ticket. And so I stood at this counter thinking I was going to miss my flight for like an hour, it felt like. And I was so exhausted. I slept maybe an hour on the plane. And then when I got here, I just needed the easiest, most convenient thing next to me because I was so ready to go to bed. So I ate a burger from Five Guys, and that made me pass out right away. Um, and yeah, that was rough. So yeah, no, I fully accept how irresponsible that was for me to do. But I did it anyway. So far, I did that. I had German pancakes this morning for breakfast. That was really good. Uh, and so that and then I've been drinking espresso shots since I've been here to stay awake, which is a very European thing. So, I it's been good so far. The experience is really cool, and I've written a lot about this. And I would encourage you guys to go read, as I always do, the Daily Memphian. Wrote about Memphis tourism being over here. Wrote about the Chamber being over here. They're going to pitch a direct flight Memphis to London to British Airways and Virgin Atlantic in London. The Chamber will, and so fingers crossed on that. That would be pretty cool. If we could get an international flight. I'd like some more direct flights to other parts of the United States. That would be pretty convenient for work. But London would be cool too. Um, and had the chance to talk with the entertainment teams and the league office about all that they're trying to do here. And one of the things that has continuously come up is that the Grizzlies got put on the stage in part because they have rising stars and interest across the league. And then the question becomes, is Ja Morant going to play in these games this week? It's obviously been a little bit of a mystery, a little curious. I think the last 5 games, he has not played with the calf contusion. He went from questionable in 2 games, from questionable to doubtful in the third game to out for the next 2 games. And it's a bruise. So Isolo has insisted, I believe you were there Sunday, that it's the injury that's holding him out. But I think you're not paying attention if you're not willing to question it. No?
I mean, I don't. I would only question the word insisted. I think he said because he has no
Okay.
choice. He has no choice but to say. And maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but either way, that's what he has to say. And at sometimes when you're in these public settings, as you're a representative of the team, there's a script, and you have to go by the script. And I don't, which it's fine, but I don't. I think there's a lot of reason to be skeptical of that. I don't think he pounded the table and said, "This is true, don't you dare." I think he said what he had to say.
So this is a different situation because the league has spent more than a year preparing for these games. And if you go read the stories, you'll have an idea of just how in depth they've been in the process of making this happen. And Berlin, especially, is a market in which they view as a real opportunity to grow the game and grow the fan base. And it's basketball is the fastest growing sport in this country right now. And so it's a big deal. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of pressure on John to play in these games this weekend. Bottom line, not just from the NBA, but from Nike, who wants to capitalize on this opportunity over here and sell basketball shoes, and from Amazon Prime Video, who's broadcasting the games. And this is something that they take pretty seriously. So I was really interested to see what the answer was going to be. And frankly, if he was going to be at practice this morning. And he, like I said, he was not out there for the first 15 minutes that we saw. And then I was told he did practice, but he was getting treatment, and that's why he wasn't on the court. And he did eventually come back out. He was in full uniform and got on, got collected his things and got on the team bus. The NBA has done all this stuff to try to combat this, right? They've in 2023 put in new rules to say, hey, you can't rest players in nationally televised games, star players. So star players for the league, any player that's made an all-star game or an all NBA team in the last 3 seasons. Ja has in 2023, he was an all-star. So um, the Grizzlies can't, what I'm saying is the Grizzlies can't just fib this because it's a very quick way to go under investigation by the NBA,
Right.
especially in a setting like this. And so if Ja is capable of playing these games, the NBA is going to almost certainly ensure that he plays in these games, whether he's happy about it or not. And we don't have clarity in terms of whose decision it's been for him not to play, if the injury's been real, if the injury is serious enough that he should have been out for 5 games. It's hard to know, and the speculation to me is more than fair about the situation when you look at the big picture.
I will take two of those sentences you just said and separate them. The injury real, injury serious enough. The injury's real, and we saw him get injured with the calf contusion. So the injury's real, and no one questioned anything the first game or even really the second game from that. It's more as the games add up, and then the changing designation. It doesn't seem like the kind of injury that would warrant a downgrading designation over time, right? A calf contusion. So I think there's real reason to wonder about it at this point, but it was a real injury.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. And I would also just add that these aren't empty threats from the NBA in terms of like their player participation policy. They fined the Cavaliers $100,000 for resting 2 star players in the same game earlier this season. The Cavs then a month later rested or did not rest. They said it was a toe injury / injury management for Darius Garland in December when they played against the Raptors. It may have been late November and the fine got handed to them in December, but that was $250,000 for violating player participation policy. And they investigated the Cavs for that. So the league is very serious about this now. They want to make sure that the star players are on the floor. And so I, for that reason, lean towards Ja is going to play in these international games. I wonder when he gets back if he'll continue playing for the Grizzlies. We don't know if a deal will get done or not, but I think these are a big enough stage where the league is going to say, if Ja can go, Ja's got to go. You have anything to add to that?
I mean, that, people I've talked to, outside of Memphis, including, that's sort of been the assumption is that he would play in these games. So I guess that's sort of been my assumption. I don't know any better, and so we'll see.
In terms of the atmosphere and what I'm expecting it to look like here, I think it's going to be pretty cool. I think it's going to be a good experience from TV. It's freezing cold. I did not realize Berlin is further north than like Toronto. It's so cold. So that part of it has been rough. There's snow and ice all over the ground outside, so it's very hard to get anywhere. But I do expect that the fans are going to turn out really big for both of these games. I talked to Kelly Flatto, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, who's head of global events for the NBA. You can go read the story over at the Daily Memphian. And she said she's expecting a pretty electric atmosphere for these games. I can't say for certain, but I believe they're both sold out or close to sold out. So the atmosphere should be really good when they play over here in Europe. It's also going to be really weird to have the Grizzlies play in the middle of the day on a Thursday in Memphis, I'm sure, but I'm expecting a pretty fun atmosphere. The other part of this is the Desmond Bane element. We haven't even gotten to that or talked about that at all.
Right.
Old friend Desmond Bane, now playing for the Orlando Magic. Spoke to Desmond Bane, have a story up with him. In which, and I was curious if this was going to be like a Chris eye roll comment or something that you found believable, but Desmond Bane talked about when he was in Memphis, he, Dylan, Ja, and Jaren, they'd go out, they'd have a late night, whatever, and they would get out there and they would talk about wanting to stay together. We'll take less money if we'll do whatever it takes to be able to keep this team together. And then Bane eventually said, yada, yada. That's just not the reality. That's just not how things work in the NBA. Do you think, in hindsight, this also comes on the heels of Dylan Brooks saying the front office moved too fast? Do you think, in
Right.
hindsight, that they moved too fast?
Well, I thought that was a very insightful and mature comment, and interesting comment from Desmond Bain. It's easy to see, young players, camaraderie, talking like that. And it's easy to also to see how that's not really the way the NBA works. There's not a lot of examples of that necessarily. It's also the case that as good as that core was, it wasn't Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh. I mean, and so they won one playoff series. I think they maybe could have won more if they'd been kept together, and then the Morant you saw in 2021, 2022 remained that Morant. That didn't happen. I do think to some degree the Grizzlies moved too fast in the sense of, or honestly, it's interesting. Maybe they moved too slow, right? You come out of 21-22, a lot of criticism, and I share it, and I voiced it at the time, was not moving more in on the immediacy of that team, and instead, getting rid of some veterans and bringing in rookies. That wasn't a too fast move. That was a too slow. So the implication of too fast is too fast away from those core players. We've litigated this so much. The Dylan Brooks thing went in a way that most fans were not mad about him moving on when it happened. They're mad now, but they weren't mad when it happened. I think whatever you want to do in terms of second guessing decisions made in that era, the reality is that I don't think there are any like alternate reality battery of decisions that would have fundamentally changed what that team was going to do once you factor in a season ending and then really the next season too, a major season ending, next season altering injury for Brandon Clark, and then a major season ending, next season altering injury for Steven Adams. And then not only the Ja Morant league suspension stuff, but even more importantly, the torn shoulder labrum that was another season-ending injury. When those three things happened, boom, 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 nothing else was going to alter what the team was going to be able to do in the face of all that. And so that's where I sometimes things don't work out, and that's just this is one of those things.
It does feel that way. I will say on Dylan, I had a conversation with somebody that was a former scout in the NBA, and I was just talking about the Ja Morant situation with him. And one thing that he brought up was like the league is going in a direction now, and it made me think about Dylan. The league's going in a direction now where talent is almost secondary to having a bunch of dudes that play really hard. And the example that he used was the Thunder, right? The Thunder have endless players that just play extremely hard. And maybe we all, because everybody sort of felt like it was time to move on from Dylan. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people felt that way. And maybe those people felt that underestimated the fact that Dylan's pure energy level and effort was worth the price, and worth the headaches of I'm a better offensive player in my mind than I actually am on the floor. And I do think that there's probably some truth to that in the NBA nowadays, talent is important, but it may be secondary to the level of competitiveness in which your team plays with on a night to night basis. And Dylan brought that. Like, you have to give him credit for that. He brought a lot of that.
Oh, I agree, and I feel like on the continuum of pro anti Dylan when he was with the Grizzlies, I feel like I was pretty well solidly more pro, but because for those reasons, because of what he did defensively, because of the shot creations, even the shot making went awry. Given some of the injuries and other issues they had, sometimes they needed him to be able to create a shot. And so I mean, I've always liked Dylan as a player. I didn't like call for him to go, but it was a lot of. We don't need to relitigate all the everything from the past, but there was a lot of stuff happen down the stretch of that made that exit not at all surprising to pretty much even fans or anyone when it happened.
Yeah, no, that's right. Desmond Bain feels like a guy who would go off in a revenge game. No. He
Yeah, I
seems
mean,
like that type. He says that he was really complimentary, honestly, of Memphis and pretty understanding of the trade, and he got traded to a good situation, so you can't feel too bad for him. But he does feel like the type that may have two big games against Memphis this weekend.
yeah, I mean, the Desmond Bain thing is very different from the Brooks thing or what the Morant thing might end up being. That was not the Grizzlies, the organization deciding, okay, we need to move on from this guy. That was the organization deciding we need to shake things up and we can get a lot for this guy, which is just a different kind of thing, you know? And so, yeah, Bain can go off against anybody any old time. He could have extra motivation. The fact that it's not in Memphis, to me, like, and you wrote about that. The fact that it's not in Memphis takes away from the personal aspect of it a little bit.
We should wrap up here. I do want to note that we are recording this in the middle of the day on Tuesday. Grizzlies are going to have another practice tomorrow here in Berlin. We'll see. There's a chance that Ja Morant may talk for the first time since reporting came out about the potential for him to be traded. So I would be keeping my eye out for the Daily Memphian and our reporting tomorrow on that. It could be an interesting day. It may not happen. I don't know. I think that it's still up in the air, but I think everyone's hoping to hear from Ja. So it will be interesting to see what he has to say potentially tomorrow, or if he doesn't talk tomorrow, if he plays in the game, he'll be available after the games. So going to be an interesting few days ahead for the Memphis Grizzlies, potentially weeks, and we'll probably have more to talk about on the Ja front as that approaches. Anything else from you, Chris?
No, nothing else from me. You have a good time over there.
What's your favorite German food
I can't
or
say
movie or music? What
you
do you know
know,
about German culture, my man?
German, in the Grizzlies locker room on Sunday after they beat the Nets, from coming from the weight room, I don't think it was necessarily a player, maybe some strength coach or something, but coming from the locker room, there was Ramstein, which is a German sort of metal band from the 90s. And then there was the Scorpions, Rock You Like a Hurricane, a German hair metal band from the 80s. That was kind of funny to hear the German metal. So it felt like someone sort of had their playlist going. Unless you're big on classical, and I'm not big on classical, like German music is not something that's necessarily held in the highest regard. It is very high regard in terms of classical, but otherwise, German pop music, maybe not the greatest. Um, German movies. There was a lot of great filmmakers fled Nazi Germany and came to America and resettled in Hollywood. And some of the very greatest Hollywood movies of the 30s and 40s and 50s were made by expatriate German filmmakers. Fritz Lang, Ernst Lubitsch, Douglas Sirk. Really great stuff. But a great movie that Fritz Lang made in Germany early 30s, is M, starring Peter Lorre, which is sort of an early crime. It's about the police forces in the city and the criminal underground both tracking the serial killer within Berlin, and that is a all-time classic movie.
I just pulled up. So yeah, I just pulled up some famous songs about Germany. I'll get some thoughts here. 99 Luftballons
By Nina, that's a German
by Nina.
new wave band.
Worldwide hit, it
Oh yeah,
says.
that was a massive hit in the early 80s.
Uh,
There's the English language version, 99 Red Balloons, but go with the German version, 99 Luftballons.
Big in Japan, Alphaville, an 80s synth pop song with a distinct German connection. I don't know what it is because I have no
Yeah,
idea what that song is. You know that one? No?
I know.
Uh,
You got various krautrock stuff from the 70s, Kraftwerk and stuff like that.
and of course, one I actually do know, Where Are We Now? David Bowie, a reflective look at his time in West Berlin.
Okay,
Do you like that song?
I don't know that song.
No. Well, anyway, a fun weekend ahead here, and we will have you covered from Berlin with plenty of things. I did stop into a beer hall and saw a guy playing a tuba. That was kind of cool. So I got that German experience. But other than that, it's been a lot of writing about the Grizzlies and going to practice. And so we will be back at it tomorrow with more stuff from overseas. But until next time, for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.